Welcome to Petrol Ped and welcome to the much requested comparison between this, my Porsche Boxster 718 GTS, and this, my new Hendy Group long-termer, the simply magnificent Lotus Emira V6 manual. Now, before we start the video, I know in this format they are very different cars, but hear me out. The Boxster shares a huge amount with the Cayman, and I think the Cayman is a direct competitor to the Emira, and you never know, in the future, maybe Lotus would chop the roof off the Emira like they did with the Exige. That'd be cool, wouldn't it? Anyway, first up, I think we need to talk styling. Now, I might be a little bit biased here because this is my car, but I think roof up or roof down, the Boxster is a beautiful looking car. Cayman as well. So there's no doubt that this is a beautiful sports car. It gets lots of compliments and I think it's quite subtle in its design. However, in my humble opinion, the Emira takes styling to another level. The way I describe it is the Boxster and Cayman have sports car looks. The Emira has supercar looks. This thing is drop dead gorgeous. Now, I'm sure for some of you, the paint choice of this car, Hethel Yellow, is a bit Marmite. You either love it or hate it. I just think it makes a mega statement. If I were to buy one of these though, I would buy the dark green. I think it's called Verdant Green Metallic. But either way, when you walk up to this car, you know you're going to get in something special. And honestly, I get lots of press cars, I get to drive lots of nice cars. The attention this car has had since I've had it, whether that's people asking to take photographs when I'm filling it up at the fuel station, or when you're driving along a dual carriageway and you've got little kids holding smartphones out the window, asking you to slow down and drive past so they can get a picture. It's a beautiful, beautiful car from any angle. I'm not going to do so much at which one wins, but I think styling-wise, the Emira is right up there and holds its own against some of the very best supercars in the world. Okay, let's talk powertrain and performance. Now, both of these cars have a very similar recipe, but just slightly different ingredients. Let's talk about my car first. So this is the GTS. In here we have a mid-mounted 2.5 litre flat 4 turbo with 360 horsepower, all going through a 7-speed PDK semi-automatic box and rear wheel drive. And I know some of you are going to be going, it's not a proper Boxster unless it's got 6 cylinders. I'm going to talk about that when we get out driving, if I may. And then the other thing is approximate curb weight of this car, because you know what my history is like with weights. We're talking around about 1,450 kilos. The Emira, again, mid-engined, but this is the 3.5 litre V6 supercharged Emira, and this has the 6-speed manual gearbox. You can get the V6 with a semi-auto as well, but this is the manual, rear-wheel drive, and this is producing about 400 horsepower, so a little bit more power, but I still think it's in that region of power and torque that makes it really usable on a normal road. You can really get on these cars, and don't get me wrong, they're very, very quick. But I think if you get in some very high-end performance cars or supercars that are north of 500 horsepower, they've almost got too much power to use safely on the public road. I don't feel that with these two cars. But the interesting thing is Lotuses are known for their lightweight. This car, though, is just a smidge over 1,400 kilos. So yes, it's lighter than the Boxster, but not by a great deal. And the reason for that we'll see in a moment when you get inside it, because this is a Lotus that has an interior you actually want to sit in. But let's talk interior, and we'll start off with mine. Now, a couple of years ago, when I'd had the Clubman written off and I was looking for a new car, I was very close to buying a Lotus Exige from Hendy's. They sourced me one of the very last Exiges. It was in a very lurid shade of green, and it was an amazing car, very track focused. But it was the interior, amongst a couple of other things, that really put me off, because it was just so stripped back, just so basic. And I wanted my car to be a car that I could daily, although I don't really daily this car, but do long journeys in, drive tours. I wanted it to be somewhere really beautiful to sit in, and that's exactly why I love this car so much. This Boxster's interior is beautiful. It's very comfortable, very well appointed. It just has a quality feel to it, and I love it to bits. The Exige, not so much. However, Emira, now that's a different story. This isn't like any Lotus I've ever sat in. It's a really nicely appointed place in here. I know this car shares a lot of underpinnings with the Evora, even though Lotus said it was a brand new car. The difference is, though, firstly, it's got carpets. The sills, although they're wide, they're not so wide that it impairs you getting in and out of the vehicle without looking like a complete fool. And then once you're in, it's just a really nicely appointed cabin. The seats are lovely. The driving position is fantastic. The steering wheel's a slightly weird shape, but it's very driver focused. And then this gearbox, we talk about this when we get out driving, it is, once you get your head around it, it's a thing of delight. So yes, this is now definitely a Lotus that you could sit in for a long journey. You could daily it. It's beautiful. You know, it's not a kind of track special car. This is a luxury, nicely equipped car that you could do a drive tour in. The challenge, though, if you're going to do a drive tour, you're going to want to take stuff with you. So the big question for me is, how much stuff can you get in this car compared with my Boxster? First up, my Boxster. I'm always amazed by just how much stuff you can get in a Boxster when you're going away. First up, you have a front storage area, a frunk or a fruit. And you can see in here, there's absolutely huge amounts of space in there. You'll easily get a couple of cabin bags, a crash helmet if you're doing a track day, something along those lines. It's a huge storage area up front in a Boxster or a Cayman. And then we walk around the back, although it's mid-engines, and I've got obviously to make some space here for the retractable soft top. If we come round into the boot, there's a really ample storage space in the boot. It's not quite as big as the front, but you can still get plenty of stuff in there, and it kind of goes in at the back as well. You can really, especially if you're using soft bags, you can get loads of stuff in there. And the engine in this car is kind of behind that bulkhead. The only giveaway are some little caps there to do things like topping engine oil up. So there's a huge amount of stowage in a Boxster. So when I looked at the Lotus, the first thing I thought of, oh, okay, well, it's bound to have a kind of front storage area just like the Boxster, right, in here? Nope. So there's no stowage in there at all. In fact, you can't actually get this. I mean, it's beautifully sculpted. I love the way the sculpting of that goes in there. Very Evira. You can see kind of family DNA, but there's no stowage up front at all. In terms of rear stowage, well, you can come round the back. The challenge with rear stowage, and I'll compare it to the Boxster first off, you've got this quite small stowage area there. I've got a little trickle charger, but it's not massive. And the big challenge is it's in the engine compartment, and that engine has the potential to get hot. And if you were to compare that with the Cayman has an engine just there, but it's got a parcel shelf, and you can put stuff on the parcel shelf, and it just makes it an awful lot more practical. So that's the first bit of stowage. And then the second bit, if we just come around, there's some internal stowage, and this is something you don't get in the Boxster. But if we look at the back of the seats in here, I've got a little flick here, and I'll pull the seat forward. That now is a parcel shelf where I can store soft bags, those types of things. But it's not a gigantic amount. So I think the challenge with this car for me, and I didn't realise it until I picked it up, and that's for me one of the great things about having cars like this as long-termers, is I think it's not that you couldn't take this on a drive tour, you just have to be really clever with your packing, and also the stuff you put in the rear, make sure that none of that is temperature sensitive. You know, don't go delivering Easter eggs in a Lotus Emira, otherwise you're going to end up with basically just liquid chocolate by the time you get there. But in its defence, Boxster and Cayman, for me, are remarkable at the amount of luggage you can get in them. Now, I must admit, right now, I am a lucky boy and very spoilt for choice, having these two in my garage. Which one do I choose? Which set of keys do I go for? Well, I think the only way we can talk about that is to take them both out for a drive and talk about a number of different things to do with driving. So first up, a comment that I've had in a couple of comments is, could you daily drive these cars? So let's head out onto some lovely roads, avoid the potholes, and answer a few questions about the driving dynamics of these two beautiful cars. But I think you'll agree from the outside, whoa. So first driving question I'll be asked quite a lot, I'm sure, is could you daily drive a Boxster GTS? And the simple answer to that is absolutely you could. I don't, however, with this car. I try and keep the miles under control as much as possible. But when the weather's like this, when the sun is out and shining and it's dry, it's difficult not to pick up the keys to this car and go for a drive with the roof down. It's a stunning thing. But I do try and keep this car for the more special occasions. Okay, so could you daily a Lotus Emira? Of course you could. Would I want to? Probably not. Now actually, the regular running of the car would probably help it out a great deal. If you weren't running it regularly, I'd have this car on a trickle charger, there's one in the boot, and that's not something I ever need to worry about with my Porsche. But I just get the feeling that this car needs a little bit more cosseting and a little bit more love. But the reason I wouldn't daily drive this car is because of just how special it is. I'm not saying the Boxster isn't special, but this thing has a sense of occasion about it. You walk up to it in the garage and it just looks fantastic. You get in it and it makes you feel amazing, and I just wouldn't want that to become too familiar, too regular an occurrence. I'd want to long for it. I'd wait for the whole week of work, and then on a Sunday morning when the weather's like this, I'd go for a drive, or I'd plan a road trip and I'd do something special in the car. So could you daily a Lotus Emira? It's probably the most dailyable Lotus there's ever been, but I wouldn't want to do it. And that's putting to one side any concerns you've got about mileage and those types of things. So next up is noise, and I'm sure a big old debate. Let's hear this one first. This car does sound good. It's got a Miltech aftermarket OPF back exhaust on it, which just gives it a bit more bark and a bit more rumble. But even the fan I am of the 4-cylinder turbo Boxster engine in this car, I can't deny that if you had a Boxster with the 6-cylinder engine in it, it would sound better. When you get those up in the top end of the rev range, they absolutely wail. And it's hard to think of a much better sounding engine. But in its defense, this little 4-pot sounds pretty good. Now I know my Boxster would sound much better with 6 cylinders. That's not something you have to worry about in this car. Ready? Just listen to that! I am a big kid when it comes to superchargers. There's something about a supercharger whine in a car that I find simply intoxicating. But when you come down into a corner and you just the crescendo of noise, it's a constant whine in the background, and then you just get on it and change gear. It's a magnificent thing. And I've had a few people follow me, and this car makes just as good a noise on the outside of the car as it does on the inside of the car. So I'm afraid certainly comparing this to my car, this wins hands down every time. I'm not quite so sure it would be so close if you had a 6-cylinder Boxster, especially if you had the sports exhaust or an aftermarket exhaust on, because at full chat those things sound magnificent. But honestly, this V6 Emira, it just sounds awesome. Absolutely awesome. And unfortunately, it eggs you on and it makes you just want to drive more. And we've just listened to that and out the corner. Oh yeah. So what do these cars like to drive down a nice bit of road? Well, I just bloody love this car. It has just the most beautiful steering, the perfect balance of power, a fantastic gearbox, and you don't actually have to drive it all that quick, especially on a sunny day when you've got the roof down. It just makes you feel great about the world, to be honest, this car. There's very little I don't like about it. Yes, you could say you could have the 4-litre GTS, it's got more power, it's got that sonorous 6-cylinder engine which might give you that little bit more of an engaging drive, but seriously, if you take a Boxster GTS down any nice bit of road and get to the far end of it without a smile on your face and without just throwing plaudits at the car because of how good it is, then I really don't understand you as a person and as a driver, because they are phenomenal things. And if you put a tip-top roof on it and turned it into a Cayman, it would be just as good. Phenomenal car. Driving my Boxster down this road quickly takes skill, but driving this Lotus down here is a whole nother level. This gearbox is beautiful, very close gates on it, very short throw, very clunky and mechanical, but it does take quite a bit of getting used to. Pedals are perfectly spaced for heel and towing. There's no auto blip feature on this car, so you have to do it for yourself. Once you get your head around the gearbox though, oh man, this car delivers in terms of driving engagement like very few cars I've driven. You've got to be so on it though, you can feel the lightness of the car. It's much more jittery than the Porsche. It kind of feeds back far more about what's happening on the road surface, and that makes for an engaging drive. But that also means that you really need to be quite a competent driver to exploit the most out of this car. I think the Porsche will do quite a lot for you, but this thing, you need to do it all yourself. And going back to the daily driver question, that's another reason why I think daily driving this car would be not a pain, but more of a challenge, because this gearbox is just not as relaxing. You really do have to think about everything. You need to drive this car smoothly, you need to be really in tune with the car, you need to have really great feel on the clutch and the throttle, you need to get your head around the gates of the gearbox. But for me, that's everything driving's about. That's everything that makes me feel great after a drive, that you just think, oh, you know, when you get a great gear change, you get a nice heel and toe and your whole body goes, yeah, that was a good one. And you just think about everything that's taking place between you and the car. And that is the essence of this car. That's everything this car is about. That's everything for me a pure driver's car is about. Lotus have been doing that for years, and this Emira delivers that in absolute spades. The brakes are very good down into second. I might grab first here because it's quite a tight corner. I'm in track mode, so the traction control's just backed off a little bit, but is as good a car as I can imagine you'd want. Yes, it's faster than the Boxster, but not by a massive amount. But it's just the lightweight, nimble feel to it. It's just delicious, absolutely delicious. Heroes going up the Petrol Ped hill climb on a bike. Come on, chapeau! With this car. Head up the Petrol Ped hill climb. Last thing to mention briefly is the gearbox in this car. You can get it in a manual, but I love the PDK in a Porsche. But I guess we need to finish off by talking price, and this is where this comparison kind of falls down a little bit, because I bought this car used, not new. But honestly, I think that's probably where the Lotus starts to have some problems, I'm afraid. But God, this car eats this hill up. Boy, oh boy. Whew. Calm down a bit now. Final thing I want to talk about with this car though is price. I mentioned the fact that the comparison with the Boxster is a bit unfair because I bought my Boxster used. My challenge with this car is, when they first came to market, Lotus were talking about a car that was going to cost high end of 60s, maybe early 70s. And the first cars, that was about where they were. Unfortunately, the first car started to sell quite above list, and Lotus adjusted the price. So we're now looking at around about 90,000 quid. Now, first up, there's a lot of car here for £90,000 in terms of the way it makes you feel as a driver, the performance you've got, and most importantly the looks. You've got supercar looks for sub £100,000. My problem is though with that is it starts to bump you up against some really, really good cars. And if we're thinking about the Porsche comparison, a 4-litre GTS, Cayman or Boxster, is going to give this car for a run for its money, even more so than mine did. But for 90 grand, you can start to look at maybe even getting into something like a Cayman GT4, used, admittedly. But a Cayman GT4 in this, whoa, now that's a comparison I'd like to do. Now, admittedly, you can also see Emira's used ones on the market for much more sensible money, you know, 50s, 60s maybe. And that's a lot of car. I guess some of you will be concerned about the reliability issues. I know quite a few people with these that have had problems with them, but I could say that about most cars, to be fair. You know, everyone slags off McLarens. I've got a mate of mine who's just done a drive tour in a 675 LT, no problems at all. He's done like 15, 16,000 miles in that car and he's had no problems at all. Incidentally, quite fancies one of these. So there's always tales of woe with every brand. And I know Lotus need to sort a few things out, but on the whole, this car, wow. Now, I will be doing a full review of this car. There's still things I haven't talked about in this car, but I didn't want to do it all in one video. The next thing I need to do is take this car to find some really cool roads, maybe in Wales or Yorkshire or somewhere cool. So stay tuned to the channel for that. But I hope you've enjoyed this one. A difficult one to film and lots to talk about, so it's probably way too long. But yeah, big thanks to Hendy Lotus of Southampton, which is in Eastleigh. I'll put their details below. This is one of their demonstrators. If you want to have a go in one of these, find out what it's like for yourself, I would strongly recommend doing that because they are an incredible bit of kit. But for now, I'm going to head on home and then think about my next drive in the Lotus. I hope you enjoyed that one, guys. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Comments below are always welcome. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Petrol Ped for plenty more content to come. And I'll see you on the next film. You take care, guys. Drive safe.